This means we have now reached the open forum part of the meeting. I've only had advance notice of one would-be questioner, and just to complicate matters, Mr. Woodburn, your first question, because it relates to an item that's on the agenda, I suggest we wait until we've had the introduction to that item, and I'll invite you to comment on that one then.
That's the Cherrington Road.
Which is the yes, that's the speed limit on Cherrington Road. But if you'd like to introduce your second item, the committee will be happy to hear you now.
Right. Is there a microphone system?
It's just coming.
Sorry. Yes, I won't stand up if you don't mind. I'm a bit unsteady on my feet. Now, I'm a pedestrian, a cyclist, and a motorist. And I want to comment on the proposals for the new Addenbrooke's major roundabout, the big roundabout, at the end of this road, and which links this road with Fendon Road, with the road leading into Addenbrooke's, and with the continuation of Hills Road up to Bagram Road. Now, the proposals to introduce a pedestrian facility which is a crossing of the roundabout so that pedestrians can cross it on foot. Now, this doesn't seem to have been widely publicised, but I went to a public meeting at Addenbrooke's on the subject where the designer talked about the speed. My concern is that the cycle lanes around the roundabout, which I use all the time, I constantly use them, that many of them are to be removed in order to improve the pedestrian facilities. The cycling officer for the city was at this same meeting, was unaware of the proposal, and a member of the cycling team at the county council, also at the meeting at Addenbrooke's, was also unaware of the situation. I find it extremely worrying, and I do think that the improvement of pedestrian facilities should not ever be at the expense of cycling facilities. You need to allow adequate space in a town like Cambridge, where what needs to be reduced is the motorised traffic, but not cycling and pedestrian facilities. I wanted to give my view because this isn't well understood, and I do think it's really important to understand those who cycle around the roundabout is that the proposal is to remove much of the cycling provision that exists at present around the outside of the roundabout. The one other point about, there are some crossings proposed, and I have some suggestions about the location for those crossings and the improvement of other accesses to Addenbrooke's, but I think that Councillor Moore would be better to speak on those than I do.
Thank you very much. I suppose at this point I turned to board councillors, and indeed Councillor Moore was directly in my sight.
Right, can I? Yeah. Can I borrow the map? Thank you. These are the technical drawings. I'll leave them out for you to have a look at the end. They pass through the first phase of the planning committee as...
No, you should
Sorry. I've got one here. Thank you. Sorry.
Have you look at it before you say?
Right. The technical drawings, which were unintelligible to anyone but a road crossing engineer, got provisional approval through the
Councillor, just a caution, as I say, we are pressed for time.
Okay.
We can't go into too much detail.
I'll be very quick. The consequence of the lack of feedback was that the engineers kindly provided an annotated set of documents about it, which are they're still not terribly easy to understand, but they're a lot easier. The main points that I would like to make are that this roundabout is going to be very good to help people because of some of the crossings. The crossing into the centre is almost universally a concern. Each of the disabled people I've talked to said they can't make that crossing. If you look at the routes that people use, they avoid the roundabout. And if you ask people why they're going out of their way to using the routes they do, they're avoiding the roundabout. It's perceived quite rightly to be very dangerous. So if we're going to get pedestrian and cycling access into the campus, we need to be pushing parallel things. This is only one part of it. And I've left my first comments at the back there with the address of the planner to whom we need to write. There is a deadline for tomorrow at midday, which is why.
Thank you very much. Obviously a very local issue. Councillor Ashton.
Yeah, just ask a question. There's a ward council of Cherryington, which neighbours Addenbrooke's, and a lot of people go there. I've never heard anything about it till tonight. I've never seen a diagram about it until tonight, and I'm told tonight that tomorrow is the deadline to say about it. So I'd like to know when this scheme actually came into the public domain and why ward councillors in the south area haven't been given any notification.
I think the import of the original question from Mr. Woodburn was around the fact that even city cycling officers didn't know about this. So I think there is possibly an issue there. When was the consultation actually launched? Do we know that?
I have that it was last year around November time, and no one saw it. The technical documents were not understood by people. You couldn't make head no sense of what was a traffic light and what was an electronic thing to control the traffic light. They were just symbols on the roundabout, and I think that's why they didn't get any feedback. And it wasn't until I made a big fuss that we should have been focusing on pedestrians and cyclists and not on cars, that the county council recognised that they made a mistake in the emphasis of what they were trying to get. So the planning system then extended and changed the deadline, and the deadline's coming up. But I've only had those brochure in the last week or so.
Right. It is madness in the sense that clearly people that should have known about it didn't know about it, but it's not the fault of anyone present in this room that people didn't know about it, I think. Councillor Dryden.
Well, a couple of things actually. I hadn't seen this until Tim showed me when he came in tonight, and I have to declare an interest. Well, I know this has come up on the board of governors for Edinburgh Hospital, and with that position I didn't know about this either. So as a council, I think the county council perhaps know more about this. They should do than we do as city councillors, because it's a county council responsibility, I think.
The responsibility for defining what the engineering solution was the county council's. But it's the city council responsibility because it's the Addenbrooke's developments. So it's part of those, and it's being funded by S106 from those developments. And it's critical to the developers because this is in the way. They've got to get this agreed and put in place before they can start doing any developing.
Councillor McPherson?
I would suggest it's very difficult to get an agreement when you haven't consulted with anybody. That's going to be quite difficult to get an agreement, let's be fair. And although you say we accept that, it's not for anybody in this room, then the consultation day, now we are aware, needs to be extended significantly so that we can ask our board members.
I think the upshot of that is that I need to contact the planning department, since it seems to be a planning department consultation.
It is, and it's been squeezed, I think, on both occasions. But this is a very important one. I'm very happy to show you the diagrams at the tea break and show you the problems I think there are.
We shall hope to have a tea break. I think we won't actually get any further discussing this item at this point. So, were there any? I see a hand halfway back.
Yeah. Shooting messages.
Shooting messages is always a good idea.
Yeah. Thanks. My question to the Council also refers to the flawed consultation process. I'm a resident of Hills Road, and a number of us are very aggrieved about the whole consultation process that's been engaged in terms of its new cycleway scheme. And this is, I want to raise an issue for the City Council. There was a report commissioned on Hills Road. It's one of 7 reports, which stated that the verges were important and should be retained, the green spaces of Hills Road. And they are not going to be retained. And most of the people on Hills Road did not know that. And the cycleway team have also said that they did not know that. And it was not drawn to their attention by City Council. We want to know, the residents of Hills Road, what is going to be done to retain as much as possible of the greenery of Hills Road that was referred to in this report as being a significant part of the approaches to Hills Road. And there are 7 roads that are referred to in these reports. 7 roads. Barton Road, Hills Road, Huntingdon Road, Long Road, Mattingley Road, Newmarket Road and Trumpington Road. Where is the joined up thinking in Cambridge is what we want to know.
Unfortunately, in terms of the Hills Road scheme, I think I'm once again looking to the Queen Edith's councillors for an initial reaction. Councillor Taylor is our County Councillor for Queen Edith. Do you have a comment?
Yes, welcome Wendy to the meeting. Thank you for coming along to talk about this. We have had quite a lot of consultation from the county about the Hills Road scheme, but I understand it was only really at the last consultation meeting that the detailed plans were available showing where verges would be. The proposal is to have a thin strip of cedar along Hills Road all the way down, as you know. It will mean some loss of the central verge, and I'm afraid I don't know why the County Council didn't get on to Swing City Council when it approached them about the Hills Road Suburbs and Approaches study, because that has been around for a long time. As you know, I have met with residents and I have asked the County Council what they can do to retain the verge as much as possible.
Can I just add to that? This will affect other roads in Cambridge. I believe that Queen Edith's Way is under discussion. I spoke to the tree officers at Cambridge City Council today. They had no idea about the possibility of tree felling, tree removal, new sighting of trees on all of these roads. They said to me, oh, it looks like county is jumping the gun again. What's going on in Cambridge, we want to know. And the people that are doing this are all working to contracts. The people who are organising this we have consultants from Skanska doing the cycleway scheme. We have Balfour Beatty organising Cambridge lighting. Nobody on Hills Road knows what's happening as regards lights. Are they going to affect their hedges when these lights are moved in? Are they going to affect other roads? We'd like some answers. Some people have found out also that bus stops are going to be relocated in front of their houses with no information, nothing whatsoever. We just feel that it's really unfair. We paid our money for these significant road reports in 2012. Why haven't they been taken into account? 2 heritage organisations recommended the retention of the verges on Hills Road as part of the bosky design of the road, said that the trees and the verges were unique and was part of the important setting of Cambridge City. Cambridge is a heritage city. Why aren't its approaches important? Why aren't our councillors acting on this?
Councillor Taylor?
Thank you. If I could deal first with the points about Queen Edith's Way. There is no detailed scheme at present for Queen Edith's Way, but it has been agreed to allocate Section 106 money to provide a divided cycleway walkway on Queen Edith's Way. At the moment it's dual use, and there are lots of cases of conflict between pedestrians and cyclists. The scheme has not been worked up yet. All that has happened has been that money has been allocated. I remember that was a proposal put forward by previous councillor Sue Birtles when she represented Queen Ediths. And when details are worked up, there will be consultation with residents in the area. As far as the lighting goes, the Balfour Beatty, the council's contractor, will be consulting with residents very shortly in the next few weeks. I have some plans of the lighting scheme for Hills Road and other roads in the area if anybody would like to see me during the break or after the meeting. And with regard to bus stops, they were included in the most recent consultation, but I appreciate that there were a lot of things about the scheme that people wanted to look at, and that the details of bus stops moving might be missed. I know that there are also some new bus shelters on Hills Road on the going out of town end.
Amanda, can we extend the consultation period, if that's possible? Because just to add to the lighting, you mentioned that there will be consultation on it, but I noticed that on one side of Hills Road, they seem to be doing things to the lights. But I don't think the residents know about the lights being moved near to their homes. We've just found out. I'm sorry.
The lighting is scheduled for March or April in Hills Road. I have got plans and we've been asked to give initial responses, but we've only just got the plans ourselves. Balfour Beatty will be writing to everybody in Hills Road with full details.
Have they already started?
Yeah. Nobody's received anything.
I don't think they've started on the lighting yet. I think you'll find out.
Holes are dug.
Holes are being dug.
Walk along the road.
Yeah. And my neighbour is an architectural historian, and she's looked at the plans that I think you're referring to, and she can't make head or tail where the lighting is to go and how it refers to her garden and her front garden and her hedge. So, I mean, and she also went to the previous consultation meeting that was held on the road, and she was not told, or it was not made clear to her at all about the verges being lost. And as I said, she is a professional.
I can tell you that the lighting is a separate scheme to the cycleways, although as far as possible work will be done to coordinate later when it gets to that time. Hills Road won't be losing any lights, but the lights are being replaced to meet new British standards which have been brought in by central government. There's 2 new British standards, one for north of Queen this way and one for south of Queen this way. But there will be no loss of lights.
Councillor Ashton?
Can I make a suggestion, Chair? It might be too late. In a previous life as the Chair of this committee, we had the same issues on consultation regards to cycleways as well, and we had Mike Davis come along, who was the county cycleway champion, who apologised for some of the things that happened in the past and said he would put these things right. And my understanding was that Mike would be coming again once all this was done to update us on what's going on. So whether or not we can get in touch with Mike Davis to get him to come to one of these meetings to face the residents in person and tell them why they haven't fulfilled what they said they were going to do is the way around. Because again, we're the in-between people, I'm sorry to say to the residents, but it's the county offices and not the city offices, and we seem to have an history of the county doing things without informing the city correctly, and we try to pull them up on it now and again and rein them back, and we do get them to come to these meetings, and it looks as though it's time for the county now to come back and face up to the residents to say why they've done what they've done and what can be stopped maybe. I don't know the timing, but my understanding was I'd say the county would come back to these south areas because they came before to tell us they were doing the cycleways, asking residents how they should inform other groups of interested people. So it just seems bizarre now that they don't seem to want to come back and actually now face up and say, this is what we want to do. So I think my suggestion is we get in touch with Mike Davis, ASAP, and ask him to get to the next meeting to front this up.
Excuse me, Mike Davis did meet with residents, and he just said, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. When we referred to this report, when he referred us to the links that we should have seen and consulted on the plans, but he himself admitted that he hadn't taken note of the reports on Hills Road that were listed on the City Council website, and that he's apologised for not having been drawn to his attention. I mean, we're just feeling. He's also addressed residents who are concerned about highway boundaries being drawn from their hedges and their trees. He's addressed them to searches at highways, but searches at highways. I spoke to a number of people there. They're actually working with the cycleway team on drawing up the boundary of the cycleway, where the cycleway is to go. So they have another interest. People feel somewhat stitched up by this, to be honest.
I think obviously the reality is there's a two-stage thing. One is that county officers should possibly be paying more attention to pre-existing documents when they're drawing up their plans. The thing that I, as a city councillor, will undertake to pursue is the issue of whether there were city council officers involved in any sort of statutory consultation role who might have alerted county officers to the existence of such documents. As regards inviting Mike Davis to come to a meeting, I'm entirely happy to do that. I do provisionally have Balfour Beatty lined up to face the public wrath at the next meeting, so we'll see whether we can accommodate that.
But will there be a extended consultation time? That's what we want to know. And what are we going to get out of this? Are we going to get anything? Or is this just fobbing off yet again with getting people to apologise and just come to the meeting? What are we actually going to get out of this, the residents of Hills Road? That's what we want to know.
You're going to get the apology. It's not in my gift, though, to tell you that you're going to get anything more than that. I turn to my county council colleagues in case there's anything they can say.
I can only say I did advise Mr Davis that there was going to be a meeting this evening, but he said he was unable to attend but would be following the meeting, and interested to see what happened. I should say that the decisions on major cycleways and infrastructure taken at the County Council's Environment and Economy meeting, which meets at Shire Hall once a month. In fact, the next meeting is tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And that would be the place where the councillors who make the decisions on council on cycleways could be addressed, rather than here. Although we're very, very happy to hear comments, we're not the decision-making body here. But I will again emphasise to Mike Davis that it would be good for him to come to an area meeting to meet people locally.
Thank you. I see a hand over there.
Andrew Bauer, thank you. I wanted to articulate those two concerns actually, Hills Road works and Fendon Road roundabout. They've been spoken to very well. So I just wanted to concentrate on the political side, which is that we're hearing a lot of slopey shoulders from councillors, but these schemes have sometimes been heavily promoted by them. Fendon Road roundabouts featured in focus literature regularly, and I've been warning that we could end up with a repeat of hasty decision making like we had at the Radigan Road roundabout, where in order to please single issue pressure groups like the cycling campaign, for all the good that they do, I'm in favour of them in principle, but councillors I think are sometimes being a little bit hasty and pushing these things through early. The Hills Road works were the county councillors originally were cautious about taking the scheme forwards on an accelerated timetable, and were criticised for this by the cycling campaign and opposition councillors. But now we're seeing the result of that hastiness. And I think a little bit more caution and a bit more thoroughness might be due on these consultations. And perhaps we need to pause what's going on Hills Road so we can properly address problems residents are having at the boundaries of their property. Thank you.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because my perception during the consultation was that I was actually slightly worried that the county were hurrying it because of budgetary pressures that meant they needed to spend certain sums of central government funding by a certain deadline, and that was actually causing me a worry that they might not be consulting as thoroughly as they might. I don't know whether I was correct in that impression.
I can confirm that the county does need to spend the cycling money by a certain date in order to achieve it. But it's not really any one political party, it's the officers who decided to bid for funds for Huntingdon and Hills Roads themselves. I can't say I would have chosen to improve cycleways on Hills Road particularly, because I think our provision is already pretty good. There are other areas of the city where it could be spent better.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
Fred, I do not run the county council. I'm not quite sure, I think it's the case of officers bidding for those funds and rushing to spend money, and I would agree that it's been done too hastily, but the decision has now been taken. I think Councillor Moore might be able to tell you a bit more about the Fendon Road situation.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you. To correct one thing, Fendon Road has 2 roundabouts, one at either end. I'm just noticing that actually the consultation on that is ends tomorrow, and I hadn't realised that. And the drawings I'm not happy with. As far as the cycling money, it was one of those national dollops of money to promote cycling that came out with almost no notice. It was something like a week to get an application in, and that was pushed through to get the money. So I think that's how the thing happened. Possibly central government money that was sitting in a cycling pot that hadn't been found a home for at a relatively short notice. But I agree. The decision on the cycling routes were to use the trunk routes in and out of Cambridge, which I think probably is an appropriate way to use them quickly. But it was the corollary of the speedy pushing it through isn't very easy.
All these reports.
Yeah.
No notice on them.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued now that clearly this focus was carrying stories about something which other people didn't know about, which is curious indeed. We are running slightly behind, but I'll take one more question.
Thank you, I'll be very brief. My name's Heidi Allen. I'm Heidi Allen. I'm the Conservative parliamentary candidate, hopefully replacing Andrew Lansley this May. And I'm guessing you're Wendy. Hello, Wendy. So I've come here really just to listen it in general terms and to learn, but also I sensed Wendy's been in email contact with me about this very issue. It feels like we're a little bit going round in circles and it's very frustrating for everybody. I wonder if the best thing, one thing I'm hoping people will learn about me is I'm not really that political when it comes to local issues. I think just the right people get around the table. So Amanda, perhaps you and I can speak separately and see what influence we can exert. I've left a message for Graham Hughes today, who's the Executive Director for this portfolio, to say we need to get a meeting with residents. So Mike, I think, has done the best he can, but Mike Davis was clearly a little bit limited. So maybe we need to take this offline and get a meeting with the Executive Director for this portfolio, and let's have a meeting with residents, because we're not going to resolve it tonight, and we feel like we're going around in circles and people are just feeling frustrated. But we need to get, I think, more senior people to account, to sit down with residents and explain what's been done. So perhaps if you're happy to do that with me, let's do that with Wendy in conjunction, perhaps at a separate time, and try and get some real answers.
Councillor Ashton?
Could I ask, Chair, that through you, our County Councillor Amanda Taylor, at this meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock, actually, because I think Amanda mentioned there's a meeting tomorrow to discuss this cycle one?
The meeting of the Economy and Environment Committee, yes, I don't sit on that committee.
I don't, but whether or not you can either get a message to that committee to point out what's happened tonight, to say that the feelings of this South Area meeting tonight to that committee. So, because obviously you're on the county, and maybe you could just get a note to the chair of that committee to point out the feelings of the committee tonight.
We had a meeting with Mike Davis and about 15 residents of Hills Road, which was kindly hosted by Wendy, and I have made the Executive Director, Graham Hughes, and the Chair and the Vice Chair and other members of the Environment and Economy Committee well aware of residents' problems, but I'm happy to reiterate that.
Yes, just to say it's from the South Area as well, not just the residents, that the South Area Committee is not happy with what's going on as well.
I think at that point I'd better draw that part of the agenda to a close. I notice we have quite a few people standing. We do have possibly a couple of spare chairs around here that we can move if necessary, or if people can be sort of accommodated. We'll just pause a moment while we see if there are indeed some additional chairs in the lobby. I should point out that, contrary to my earlier statement, we are actually filmed this evening, so people should be aware of that. And Safer Neighbourhoods report. Thank you, Sergeant.
This is only the second one I've ever been to, so please be kind and gentle with me. On the 13th of October, as it says in the report, you set your local policing team 3/4 priorities. The number one was to continue work tackling Class A drug dealers. The second one was addressing the spike in social crime, and at the same time dealing with cycling offences. I do recall we also discussed whether we could deal with inconsiderate parking at the same time as inconsiderate cycling, not wishing to alienate any particular parties in relation to that. And the third one was continue with combating dwelling burglaries. So if I just draw attention to the first part of the report, which is our actions taken in relation to tackling Class A drug dealing. I don't know, would you like me to go through what's written down here? I'm mindful of the time.
I think we strike a balance between assuming that the members have read the papers that they were sent and providing a gloss so that members of the public know what we're talking about.
Right. I highlight there were three that are highlighted in the report. In addition to that, I've spoken to one of the main constables in relation to combating drug dealing, and he's added a further three actions that relate to South. One was in Trumpton Beat, a drugs warrant was executed. Another one was in Prince's Court, a particular location mentioned to me, and I think his other updates, just looking at my scribbly notes. Oh yes, there was one at Wolston Way as well. It's in addition to what I've mentioned, so it's about 6 on the south area. We combine south and east together because there's a crossover where the action takes place. Drug dealers don't particularly know there's a particular barrier in a road. And so, yes, I'm pleased to report lots of action, lots of successful warrants executed, lots of people arrested, lots of drugs recovered, also some cash recovered that's under the Proceeds of Crime Act, probably under sort of seizure, investigation, certain people on bail. We continue to have intelligence that people are travelling up from London to deal drugs, and as I mentioned in the report, we sort of had a very good look at the tactics that we're using, and with a mindset to safeguard the community and the people that are being targeted actually by some of these drug dealers from London. And so therefore, what we've started to do, and it seems to have been quite successful in the early stages, is actually visit some of these addresses that are being targeted and actually offer support to those residents and offer them a letter that makes it very clear that the police are aware of what's going on. And I'm pleased to say that certainly several of the residents have stuck those notices on their doors, and we're asking them to, if they get contact from these drug dealers, point this out to them so that hopefully it scares them away and they have to change the tactics as to how they go about what they're dealing with. And we're offering support to these people as well, because many of them have got substance abuse issues and they need support and guidance as well. So we're almost treating them as victims rather than criminals as such. So that's, let's say, that's the good news on the drugs issue. I would, current situation, would recommend it continues the line of work, because it seems to be having some effect. Second one was, third was reduce social crime in the south area. As you see from our report, the main area in the city from research where cycles are stolen should come as a great surprise is the Market Ward. So I've been consulting with the City Centre Sergeant, and we've come up with a called Operation Raptor, plan of attack really, in dealing with that crime. I've also been in a great deal of consultation with British Transport Police. It's a big problem for them at the railway station and all along the East Coast line. And yes, there's been some success in tackling it. I'm not going to flare it up and say, yes, marvellous, you've called Mr. Big of the cycle crime world. I'm afraid it's not like that. I'm afraid there's lots of people stealing bikes. Some of them are travelling to Cambridge by train, some are residents here, some of them are students taking bikes rather than getting a taxi. So we're looking again at to seeing whether we can adopt a different strategy to hopefully have a better impact. We're in the early stages of those talks in relation to what we're going to do there. I was only speaking to a crime prevention officer today about it, but we're very hopeful that the plan we've got will bear some fruit. Inconsiderate cycling, stress inconsiderate parking. I hope residents are going to say to me, I'm perhaps putting myself out here, that they've seen local PCSOs doing that type of work. They're certainly reporting back to me that they've been doing that activity, and they've received some favourable comments from residents who've noticed them there, and people where they've been trying to make sure that on the school runs people are not inconsiderately parking. So they've done some education and enforcement action in that respect. And as you can see, the what's called the LIT scheme, that I think was adopted firstly last year, whereby if you're caught without lights on a bike, you're given a provisional ticket, but then if you turn up at the police station with a receipt for cycle lights, then that's expunged. That was successful. 304 tickets were issued, 151 persons were offered words of advice, and there's some certain areas on south where that activity is taking place. So that's the road safety. I think I told it last time. Again, I would suggest that should continue, because we haven't cracked cycle crime, and I wouldn't say we've cracked inconsiderate cycling or inconsiderate parking. So I'd like for that one to continue as well. It's a good one for the PCSOs to do as well. And the third one is reduce burglaries. Before I've come to the meeting, as I wrote the report written a week or so ago, I have today been to see the detective sergeant in the burglary squad, and just to see whether there was any update to his report. I spoke to one of his colleagues. I'm pleased to say there are no series at the moment going on Cambridge City South in relation to dwelling burglaries. We did have one just before Christmas. I think for those that have signed up for the ECOPS, and if you haven't, I would urge you to do so. Go on the Cambridge Constabulary website, see the ECOPS, which is neighbourhood alert, electronic means. I did alert everybody just before Christmas to the spike of burglaries that were occurring around this area, actually. We've had several people arrested and certain people on bail, and we're hopeful that the reality is that there has been a reduction in the amount of reports of burglaries occurring in this area. I think Councillor McPherson did contact me in relation to a news report he'd read in the Cambridge News about a bit of a series in Cherry Hinton, which occurred whilst I was on annual leave over the Christmas period. And so when I looked into that, I put out an ECOPS alert for a blue BMW, but that went out just to Cherry Hinton residents because that is where we were particularly looking for a particular vehicle in that particular area. So yes, urge everybody, ECOPS, friends, relatives, please tell them all about it. It's worth doing. I'm trying to encourage PCSOs to use it more to communicate with you. When I sent an ECOPS message out for tonight's meeting, which I'd like to think is why there's so many people here, 377 people received that message. So it's a good tool for us to alert you to what's happening. I wanted to, just in addition, I went to the serious crime team as well to see whether there's any other particular matters pertaining to the South that we should be concerned about. And in a nutshell, no, there isn't. I'm pleased to say there was a couple of incidents which maybe people are aware of, maybe read in the news, but it's nothing to be concerned about or alarmed about. It's yeah, that's it. Final point, I think I just added, looking at the figures, I did notice that one of my colleagues has highlighted, which sounds alarming at the time, 59% increase in theft from vehicles when comparing the previous 3-month period. I just, when I looked at the previous year, the same period though, I think there might have been either the same or one or two reduction actually. So we're comparing, it's not really correct, I don't believe so anyway. I wouldn't be alarmed by that. I'm saying you're comparing summer months, light months, with winter, dark months, so hence there would be an increase. So if you're comparing July, August, June, July, August, with September, October, November, you've got to compare like with like. So don't be alarmed by increasing theft in motor vehicles. This is not as bad as it
might appear. Okay, thank you very much. In the first instance, do members have any questions on what we've just been told? Councillor Meffler?
Just want to thank you very much for what is happening. You're doing a good job. My question is, the money which you seize from the drugs, what happens to it? Can we have that money back into our area so we can use it wisely and all that? Because there's a lot of money seized every time. I tried to get some answers from Home Office and all that, and they said that money is used for the front line. But I think we should have to be in control of that money and stop them, so we can use it as what we want to do with it. I don't know if you can answer that question or no, I don't know.
I think, Councillor, it goes into a central pool of money, but I think the money is ultimately returned to the police. Whether it comes back to Cambridge Constabulary, whether it comes back to Cambridge City, whether it comes back to Cambridge South, I think would probably be debatable, but I think the money certainly comes back to policing, I believe.
So you're not 100% sure that money is going to come back to Cambridge, it just goes to the central part, and from that central part you allocate it to different things?
I believe so.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you. Inspector, you had the drugs as a priority over the last few months, and it was also in the few months before that. I'm glad to see that you're making headway with it. One of the issues I raised when we had this meeting 4 months ago was complaints about drug dealing in the Cherry Hinton Road, Rathmore Road area. And you did say that you would give some attention to that. I don't see it mentioned in the report, and I wondered if you'd tell us whether you've had any activity there or anything you can tell us about.
Yeah, thank you, reminding me. I think we had some correspondence over that. Yeah, I did speak to my main constable, who's the main lead on activity and action in relation to any reports of drugs activity. He did give Rathmore Road some attention, some patrol attention, prioritising what he's doing. We get lots of reports of cannabis use, potentially, I wouldn't say cannabis dealing because people don't know what's being dealt. So it's about prioritising where we put our activity and our resources, but I definitely do know that he did pay Rathmore Road some patrol attention, and also I think Rock Road was another particular road he went to because of some information that we received.
Councillor Avery?
Thank you. I'm also interested in drug dealing. When we discussed this at the last meeting, I think, like Councillor Taylor, I mentioned that I had reports of dealing in Trumpington, and it was interesting that the couple of additional items that you mentioned, the actions on drug dealing, were in the very patches that we referred to at the last meeting. So I think it's excellent that there has been some action. Now, I understand it's quite hard to share with the public the way these operations work, but I think, because I've had comment from residents that there's been open drug dealing and nobody seems to be dealing with it, which doesn't seem to be borne out by what you say. It seems like it is being dealt with, it's just not particularly easy to get some visibility on what you're doing. So I'm quite interested in how we better publicise your successes without compromising your operations. Is this the right forum for it, or are there other ways in which we can reassure people that actually stuff is happening, it's just not always quite as visible as it might be?
I share your concerns about good news not necessarily being publicised. It is difficult. We get lots of information in, and if we spend all day updating people who gave us the information, we wouldn't do anything else. I am encouraging my your local PCSOs to use the ECOP system to periodically update you with some success stories, because I am aware that it can be it's all negative, it's all doom and gloom, and I don't think that is the case. I think we are succeeding, do have some success stories, and that we can share is how I hope moving forward the ECOP system is how we'll share that with the community on a more regular basis. But this is the other forum, I think, where I'm encouraging people to come along. You're setting my team the priorities, and I'm reporting back to you what actions we're taking. So I want the public to come to these meetings to challenge me if needs be, and I'll listen to your concerns, and we'll certainly do what we can, because at the end of the day, I'm here to serve you.
Councillor McPherson?
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Happily, I think the work that not only yourself there, but across the city has been done on drugs is significant. And I echo what you say about ECOPS. That's moved on such a long way. It's been going for a number of years now, but it's now a really, really useful form to get this news out. And I too would urge everyone who can get on it to actually get on it, get their neighbours to do so. And if you have elderly neighbours who perhaps don't have a PC, print it off for them, give it to them, pop it through their door. And it's a very, very useful thing indeed, and I echo Chris's sentiments on that. Just going to the recommendations, I can say straight off the Cherry Hinton councillors here are in full support of the recommendations you have. We've just got a couple of small comments. The first is that because the target supply of controlled drugs is such an important issue, although it may just seem unimportant to say this, we'd like to see that as priority 1 rather than 2. and that would take reduced wording burglary down to 2, which doesn't make it any less significant. But the drugs issue is something that I think deserves to be on 1. And then in your mind it is priority number 1. The third one, target road safety by addressing antisocial cycling, is absolutely fine. In the light of Chris's report, I'd quite like to see that factor added into that. So antisocial cycling, stroke, cycle thefts. So I know, again, that probably will take that in, but it doesn't say so. So I'd quite like that to be on, actually seen on item 3. Thanks very much, that's me.
And Councillor Nicholas?
Yeah, thank you obviously for your kind work and all the successes that you have. I'd like to also ask if it is possible to look into an additional area, which is the end of Sedley Taylor Road, Long Road, near the Sixth Form College. We had reports that dealing of drugs has been spotted, and if you'd be kind enough to look into that one and inform us next time you meet. Thank you.
I'm seeing my colleagues' hands going up, but I think we may be drifting into the recommendations discussions. And before we do that, can I just ask if there are anyone in the audience midway back?
Daniel John. I was just, in the previous meeting where we set priorities, I raised a question about whether or not violent crime should be a priority. And I find it slightly concerning to note that violent crime is still, although it's slightly reduced in terms of absolute numbers, is still the 3rd highest crime for South area, behind other crime and cycle theft. And so I'm curious as to why violent crime isn't being set by a priority by this committee. And I would urge the committee to set violent crime as a committee. And whilst at the previous meeting, the police officer said that they would look into the statistics, and there might be some explanations as to why violent crime is high, whatever the reasons may be, I would recommend that it is set as a priority for the police to deal with it as best they can in whatever ways they can. And so wanted to put that comment to the committee.
Do you have a response to that as a possible priority?
Yes, violent crime is always a priority. It's personal crime we're talking about. I try to reassure people that we are actually encouraging people to report domestic abuse, and that may be why there is an increase in the amount of violent crime that's being recorded and reported. We welcome that. Rest assured that that is always a priority for us. People crime compared to property crime, it comes in that order. So we investigate it. We have a separate domestic abuse investigation unit that deals with violent crime. That's what they specialise in. As I said, we have a serious crime team that investigates serious violence, grievous bodily harms, that type of stuff. So it is already a priority for the police, I would say.
Can I respond to that issue?
I was going to add, I think one factor in particular with this meeting and the sorts of priorities that we set, they are very much priorities for the neighbourhood teams rather than for the Cambridge Police overall. And certain categories of crime do lend themselves more to the sort of thing we're talking about here. Councillor Biden?
Officer just explained this was brought up a couple of years ago about violence, and that was said then domestic violence is a big part of the violence, and that's dealt with anyway as a priority. I know the police already, so that was explained before.
Councillor Avon?
Thank you. Sticking with that question, and I think probably taking the point from the floor, it would help me certainly to understand more of the detail behind the numbers, because if it is the case that it's violent crime of a particular type, well then people can understand better how that can be or cannot be dealt with by sort of neighbourhood policing. Is there a way of getting more detail from behind the simple number we see here?
Yeah, I think we raised that last meeting. After that, I went to ask those questions. I thought it was very interesting point, something you ought to know. What I'm led to believe is it's almost a standardised statistical information that's provided to all local area committees, so hence they don't break them down. But mindful that I've got an ability to manage a small group of people, I think those that are who do read the RECOPS messages, the last one I think did break down the difference between the domestic abuse reports and the public place abuse reports. So where I'm able to, I will provide that myself, or my team will, although in these figures I don't think it's able to be provided. That's what I'm led to believe.
Mr. John, you wanted to come back?
That's partly been answered in the inspector's response, although the question I would still ask would be if there's a certain team dealing with domestic violence issues, even if we can't have the official figures provided in the pack, as part of this report back to this committee, is there any other further information that can be provided even at a local level?
I don't think I could, because I think, as Councillor Dryden pointed out, you know, the drive is I'm the sergeant. Thank you for promoting me. I'm your sergeant. I have 2 constables at my disposal and 5 PCSOs, and this is the local area committee to direct those resources rather than the domestic abuse department or the serious crime team.
And on the front row?
I'm Donald Douglas. It's more than a year since the 40 signs were taken down in Long Road, where I live. However, nobody seems to have noticed. And if I drive along Long Road, which I do quite often, I'm usually followed by a long tail of traffic and frequently passed by other cars. I wonder if somehow it could be drawn to people's attention that it is now 30 miles an hour and perhaps there could be occasional enforcement in that area. Thank you.
We will note it in the minutes of the meeting. Councillor Mott?
Just a quickie. Cyclists, a big youth cyclists cycling along small pavements are terrorising some people. I keep getting this. They can't come out until the big youths walk up to school. And that'd be helpful to pick some of those up and remind them that they've got a road. It's 20 miles an hour and that's safe.
If I can turn us to page 25 and the recommendations that have been put before us. We've had a suggestion for a slight amendment by Councillor McPherson. Do we have any others? Councillor Ashwood.
Thank you, Chair. The road safety side of things, I would be desperately needing to see something done about the parking on Trumpington. St Faith's School, the Perth Pre-Prep. We've got major problems in Pawson Road. I'm having a meeting this week with Bentley Road and Newton Road Residents Association. They're getting problems with antisocial parking. We've got problems right the way through the ward, but it really is getting desperately bad. And unfortunately, although I can recommend going for a traffic regulation order to try and get some yellow lines in, it's going to be at least 18 months before anything happens on that. We need something done in the short term, so if anything more could be done on that, it would be much appreciated.
Could I say, at this point, yeah, I totally support your view in that. So I did ask for road safety, and I didn't wish to alienate car users or cycle users. So I'm thinking of inconsiderate parking and inconsiderate cycling. And I think we'll also encapture perhaps some cycle fees at the same time. But that's the umbrella of the priority. If we keep it to 3 priorities, that third one being road safety, and then captures all of those concerns.
Councillor Taylor?
And thank you. I'd like to echo that point with regard to the parking outside schools, which I bring up most times, but that's because it's always a problem. I really don't think that children ought to be, life in danger when they're going to school. I take your point that you are including dangerous parking alongside the road safety target, but I wonder if you could just include that wording in the recommendation so this doesn't get lost. Perhaps add only parking, antisocial parking to the antisocial cycling.
Are you happy with that? Is that change? On that basis, are we happy that those are our 3 priorities for the South area in the next period?
Could I say a word, please?
Yes.
I live in Porton Road. Disaster. Small road, cars parked all the way down one side, cyclists going up and down because it's a cycleway, kids going to school in the morning, kids going to school at night. It's a disaster. Sorry, it's all right, they'll hear what I have to say. If you don't do something fairly soon with Porton Road, you're going to have, somebody's going to get killed. You have old people living in an old people's home, you've got long road, 6th form people parking there. It's a disaster. It's all very well you pushing it on another 18 months. Hello, Bernard. Hello, Bernard. This is ridiculous. Unless you get your act together and we get some signs up there which, in my opinion, says from 8 till 12 on one side of the road and from 1 till 5 on the other side of the road, we go nowhere. That won't take long to put up. That won't cost us very much money. Okay? Can somebody get their act together before something disastrous happens? Thank you very much.
I think the committee has agreed the policing priorities, although parking on Porton Road is certainly one to include in priority 3. So thank you very much.
Excuse me, you seem to be treating this as a complete joke. Yeah, and it isn't a joke. I live on Porton Road, as do several people in this meeting. And there was an issue, there are various issues on Porton Road. They can be split into 2 distinct parts. One is the all-day parking issue, which has always been a problem in terms of the school side of things with the prep. Parents do have to drop their children off, of course they do. Since the introduction of the park and ride charges, there are more people, whatever anybody says, there are more people parking in Porton Road and either walking to the bus stop or taking bikes out of their boots and cycling into town. That's one issue. We have construction workers from Nuffield Hospital who are regularly parking their cars as early as 6:25 in the morning. There can be 13 workers' cars parked at that time in the morning before people have even started to drop their children off at school. And there's also the issue of actually getting in and out of Porton Road. If you have cars parked all down one side of Porton Road and there are cars trying to get in and out, then there was an incident the other day where there were cars parked on the odd numbered side of the road. Near the exit to Trumpington Road, cars were snaked round out of the Perth Prep School trying to get onto Trumpington Road. Cars couldn't get in or out. If there'd been an urgent incident where emergency services needed to get into Porton Road, there was no way that they could get in. That's just one side of things. I don't know if anybody else in Porton Road would like to add.
I think at this point, though, that I hope my comment wasn't interpreted more widely as being flippant. There is a distinction, though, between parking enforcement on the part of the police with what is currently in place in terms of a parking regime for Porton, which I encourage them to do, and a broader solution to Porton's parking problem, which would involve a TRO. And that was merely why my tone may have been the way it was. I realised that there are deeper, more intractable problems on Porton that do need to be addressed, but I'm also aware that it's been a long saga so far. Right.
Could you tell us what a TRO is?
Sorry, traffic regulation order. Traffic regulation order. At which point I do need to move us on to the next agenda item because I think... No, I said at the beginning I do need to keep things...
I'd like everybody to stand up who lives in Porton Road.
So you see, get the feeling.
Well,
and stop treating it as a joke, because that's what you're doing.
We are not treating it as a joke.
You are.
No, we're not.
We want some action.
We are saying that there is certain action that can be taken this evening and that we can ask for, and there are other things that we would then need to take further on today to ask if we can have a TRO. What else can we do? Apart from obviously involving you in the process and asking you what you want and actually putting that written down and passing it on to the
Keep telling you what we want in emails.
Yeah. Do we vote Labour then when it comes to the election?
Photographs,
I have
emails,
complained for years and years and nothing has been done. Councillors have tried, I think we've spoken to all sorts of people at Accountable, and at one point I was told Forson Road is an amenity to the citizens of Cambridge. That's not really something I'd like to
I think you've almost made the point. I must admit myself, I have not attempted to tackle the Pawson Road issue. Several of my colleagues have. And I'm aware, in fact, Councillor Avery is doing so at the moment. Councillor Avery.
Has anybody been to see it? Actually gone down the Pawson? So I'm, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a councillor for Trumpton Ward. I'm sure I've had some email correspondence with some of you, and the nature of that correspondence is, of course, that it's a very difficult problem, and your problem is not unique. There are many roads like Pawson Road. I live in one such road. I think this isn't the right forum. It's the right forum for you to make clear your concerns widely. It's not the right forum for solving them. But perhaps if I could come and see you, we can then move the process for solving them forward. Would that be a group meeting?
With some urgency.
No, I'm happy to come and meet you as soon as
Particularly
you
the
like.
work at the Nuffield Hospital has increased the risk. There's a risk to the residents and all the many, many visitors and the cycle path users every day.
I understand your concern, and I'm happy to come and see you as soon as you like. So,
right, we'll arrange a meeting as soon as possible.
Yes,
please.
perfect.
I'm in Margaret James.
Okay, well, send me an email,
Yes,
and we'll sort it out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I do apologise for the fact that I'm trying to hurry us through the business, but I'm very aware that the next agenda item is also likely to generate some debate as well. Agenda item number 9. Not agenda item number 9, agenda item number 7. I think we agree. Thank you, sir. Agenda item number 7. I was about to introduce it, but I was distracted. The citywide 20 mph speed limit scheme, results of the consultation, is agenda item number 7, which is our next item. So, if I can invite John Richards to introduce the item. I do remember, Mr. Woodburn, that you wanted to speak on this. I will call you once it's been introduced.
Thank you, Chair. To introduce myself, my name is John Richards. I work within the City Council Streets and Open Spaces Service, the Project Delivery and Environment team, who are responsible for developing and delivering the Cambridge 20 mile an hour project. This item is further to the item that came before this same committee last October, and its purpose is to note the responses to the recent consultation exercise and consider which roads to recommend be included within the scope of Phase 3 of the project. Just by way of background, this is a £600,000 project allocated to introduce 20 miles an hour across Cambridge City as a whole, so a city-wide project on all those roads appropriate for 20 miles an hour control, that is. It aims to encourage active travel modes and improve safety, and particularly road safety and the environment. And has been split into 3 separate phases. Phase 1, which covered the north area of Cambridge, is now implemented. That area came subject to control widespread from spring 2014. Phase 2, which is the eastern area, has been through the consultation process, and also the County Council as the traffic order making authority, their statutory process, and we're currently at the point of procuring the work with a view to getting that work completed this spring. Phase 3 now combines both south and west central areas, so for purposes of expediency, we've rolled those two areas into one phase with the aim of completing the implementation in citywide by the end of 2015. So just to touch on the consultation process, around 24,000 questionnaires were sent out to households across the south and west central areas, and also delivered to various schools and colleges within the areas. That's actually outlined, or the consultation pack is outlined in Appendix A of the report. In addition to that, there was an online web survey undertaken to which people could log on and leave their comments. And there certainly were some returns from people who weren't directly leafleted, so those are not direct residents, if you like, of the south or west central areas. There was also a couple of public exhibitions where members of the public were able to come along and look at the proposals and see some of the data supporting it, and ask questions of officers, and either fill in questionnaires on the night or return them subsequently. Statutory consultation has also been undertaken with a list of stakeholders, including the various emergency services, but also the two parish councils that border south area, that's Teversham and Fulbourn parish councils, and also South Cambridgeshire Parish Council. That's because part of the area which effectively looks towards Cherry Hinton and the services in Cherry Hinton for day-to-day business falls outside of the City Council administrative area. In addition to the consultation exercise, there was fairly comprehensive traffic speed monitoring undertaken, which was assessing the current speed of traffic over 24 hours, effectively over a number of successive days, to identify what the existing mean speed of vehicles using those particular streets were, and pretty much most of the main roads were surveyed. I think there are around 60 different speed locations within the west central and southern areas. The consultation outcomes are reported in section 5 of the report. Between 10 and 15% response rate, roughly, which is quite encouraging actually for a consultation of this type. A small proportion, roughly about 4%, of respondents lived outside of the Cambridge City administrative boundary. The consultation responses are summarised in Appendix B to the report, which identifies that roughly 2/3 of respondents support further reduction of speed limit to 20 miles an hour across the south and west central areas. There was, however, some opposition, as reported in Table 1. Some of the statutory stakeholders were not persuaded about the suitability of further more widespread 20 mile an hour control, including Teversham Parish Council, interestingly, who were most resistant to the suggestion of any further introduction of 20 mile an hour speed limits within roads within their parish. There were certainly variations across particular roads as well in terms of the level of public support, and quite clearly the support was less clear in Fulbourn Road and Cherry Hinton Road, and also in Queen Edith's Way. When I say Cherry Hinton Road was actually split between, because of the administrative areas, between east and south. The town end of Cherry Hinton Road was included within the East Area phase. An East Area Committee decided, and that was supported by Environment Scrutiny Committee, that the town end of Cherry Hinton Road should become subject to 20 mile an hour control. But clearly the public support for the sort of the village end, the more easterly end, is not quite so clear. The traffic speed monitoring results are outlined in section 6 to the report. I'd apologise first of all for an error on table 2. It shouldn't read the responses from statutory consultees. It should of course be traffic speed monitoring data. And once again, it can be seen there that in Teversham Drift, Fulbourn Road, Cherryhinton Road and Queen Edith's Way, there is likely to be a greater degree of non-compliance with any reduction in speed limit there. County Council policy based on Department for Transport guidance recommends that 24 mile-an-hour speed limits are not introduced on roads that have a mean traffic speed of 24 miles an hour or over, and quite clearly on those 4 roads that the data that we've collected identifies that typical speeds can be expected to be higher than that. So there could be likely to be a compliance difficulty were there to be a reduction in speed limit on those roads. So moving to the recommendation, which really is for Area Committee to note the responses to the recent consultation exercise and to consider comments that you might like to put before Environment Scrutiny Committee and the Executive Councillor, who will be taking a decision in March as to which roads to include within the final scope of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I turn to Mr. Woodburn, do members have any questions of fact or... No? In that case, Mr. Woodburn, please ask your first question.
Thank you. Now, I'm a resident of Cherryhinton Road, and I wanted to say, first of all, that it does seem to me obscure to, on page 23, to refer to Cherryhinton Road in brackets remaining section without saying what that section is. And it really is a terrible fault in this report that you can't tell which section is being referred to. And it certainly shouldn't say remaining section, it should say, as has been explained by the officer, it should say that the section we're talking about is from Adkins Corner to basically to where the road joins Cherryhinton High Street and the exit from this way. So it's that section that we're being asked to comment on now. But it should say that in the document and not remaining section, which is totally unclear. But anyway, my point is that I do think that we should really seriously consider making that 20 miles an hour, as well as following the recommendation from the Eastern Area Committee, that the first part of Cherryhinton Road has a 20 mile an hour limit. Now, my reason for saying this is that it is good to have consistency. It's good to have a consistent speed limit along a road. And if you somehow break it up, and particularly if you break it up at a roundabout, it is likely to cause confusion. The other point is the road, that second section, the section from Adkins Corner to Cherryhinton, is an area where an awful lot of school children are crossing. They cross the road at the pedestrian crossing halfway along that section. And it's also a section where many people go to walk in the park there, and where, of course, the festival is held each year. I do think there's an argument for making that section a 20 mile an hour section for consistency and because of the way that the road is actually used by dog walkers, old people going to the park, and also by many school children. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose the question that comes to mind, if Mr. Richards is able to remind us, was what the voting figures had been on the non-remaining section of Cherryhinton High Street, and whether East Area went with the majority or not.
East Area did go with the majority. They considered responses that were again fairly mixed and not dissimilar to these before you this evening, and also those in North Area. the same questions about suitability in East area were asked for Cherrington Road, for Coldham's Lane, the various different sections of Coldham's Lane being quite a long road, and also Coleridge Road. East Area Committee decided that they would like to see Cherrington Road included very much on the support of local residents of Cherrington Road rather than consultation responses in general. But on Coldham's Lane they did not. They didn't feel that 20 miles an hour was appropriate on any part of Coldham's Lane, even the Newmarket Road end, which is much more heavily congested and traffic speed is much lower there. But again, I think East Area, they faced the same dilemma, that there were arguments both for and against reducing the speed limit. And in Cherrington Road, they elected to go very much with the views of local residents.
Can I open it up to any other comments? Councillor Avery?
Actually, my point's more about recommendations.
Maybe we wait and see if there are any more comments from the floor. I see a hand going up straight away.
Thank you, Chair. Brian Lowe, resident of Hinton. I have to say, and I've been in discussions with John Richards, I'm very disappointed at the quality of consultation. The amount of background information that's actually presented to actually form judgment on whether it's a safety scheme or a reduced traffic speed scheme was actually negligible. If you looked at the website, you could actually find extensive data for north and east, but you could find nothing for south. When you actually dive into the information that's actually presented at the presentations, you find that vehicle speeds in the majority of streets in this area are actually very low, are actually significantly below 20 miles an hour. Additionally, the personal accident record of this area is actually 0 for pedestrians and cyclists. So I'm finding it very difficult to believe why we're actually spending as a council approaching £1 million over 10 years with the deferred costs of maintenance, with no justification whatsoever, other than it must be safer if vehicles are slower.
Councillor Moore.
Hello. This is a different kind of a game, really. The evidence is overwhelming that the probability of a bad outcome for a collision is far better under the 20 miles if it's stuck to. And if you have consistent rules, so that everyone gets used to driving at 20, then you get people, buggers like me, who will drive at 20 and slow everyone else down, and it becomes acceptable in the end. But we know that there are collisions with cycles in the south area, lots of them, and they get reported in the A&E system, and they get reported in the police system. And it's only a matter of time between before one of those becomes fatal.
If I could actually respond.
Yes, please.
My question is simple.
Sorry, can you allow the gentleman to respond first?
We seem to be actually based. Yeah. Sorry, can you actually hear me without? Is that okay?
I can. I don't know whether everybody else.
If everybody can't, please actually just wave a hand and I'll use the mic. I accept that a collision at 20 miles an hour is much preferable to being hit by something at 30 or 40. We're talking about hypothetical situations that there hasn't been a record of any personal accidents. The current recorded speeds, as assessed by the City Council, are significantly less than 20 already. So what I'm struggling with is why we're spending this sort of money when the consultation process didn't even attempt to find out whether there are any other traffic problems that are actually concerning local residents, and that we can actually use that money much better. Now, personally, I think the number of rat-running vehicles through the area is a significantly greater issue than 20 miles an hour speed limits. The consultation didn't even try to actually get into that information. It came across with a one-size-fits-all solution for the city. A solution chasing a problem that doesn't actually exist in this area.
And the gentleman at the front.
Me, yeah. If I can have the microphone, please. My question is simple. Cyclists, especially the young ones, often cycle faster than 20 miles an hour. Are you therefore going to take them off for speeding? It's a simple question. Many of the young people I see on racing bikes go faster than 20 miles an hour, especially down Queen Edith's Way. If the idea to introduce 20 miles an hour along the length of Queen Edith's Way is ridiculous. And I don't know what, I didn't have the benefit of the minutes, so I don't know what the consultation said about Queen Edith's Way. Did it say overwhelmingly, yes, we will have 20 miles an hour along Queen Edith's Way?
It did not. 47% disagreed with the proposition, 43% agreed with the proposition.
So therefore, in essence, will it be introduced 20 miles an hour, whether we say yes or no?
This committee will take a decision on what it thinks this evening. The Executive Councillor will make the actual decision. In theory, he could disregard this committee in either direction. Not saying
so
he
what's
will.
the point of us being here talking about it then?
Because the Executive Councillor has asked for our opinion. Mr. Richards, did you want to come in?
I think what I just add to your helpful figures about responses to Queen Edith's Way. In fact, when you ask Queen Edith's Way residents, slightly, well, one more disagreed with the idea of introducing 20 mile hour control than was supportive of it. And just to back to Mr. Woodburn's earlier point about clarity, and my apologies for the lack of clarity on Cherrington Road, but the section of Queen Edith's Way we're talking about here is the section from Mowbray Road eastwards towards the Robin Hood Junction. West from Mowbray Road Junction is part of the A and B road network, and consequently, at the time we commenced this consultation, the County Council advice was that they weren't prepared to consider a reduction of 20 mile an hour on that particular route. So we're talking about a bit eastwards, effectively, of that particular junction.
Councillor Taylor?
Thank you. I was pleased with the overall response to the consultation, but I was surprised that there was only a minority in favour of changing it on Cherrington Road, and particularly Queen Edith's Way, since as a councillor over the years I get many complaints about speeding on Queen Edith's Way, and I know that when they've done police checks they found many people in excess of 40 and even 45 miles an hour. There is a school, Netherhall School, on the road as well. And although this was the response from the residents, I wonder, Mr. Richards, was there any consultation at all done with the schools?
There would have been. I have to say we haven't been able to identify any specific response from any of the schools in the consultation responses thus far.
Councillor Dryden?
Just a question actually, on some of the cases there, it's over 80% of people didn't bother to try and consultate, weren't bothered to reply anyway, so with that amount of people not bothering, is that a good response?
I think I would say it's probably what we expected for this type of project, and it certainly is similar to the other two areas where we've undertaken consultation on the same project, so North area and East area.
Possible introduction of 20 miles an hour and relation to cyclists. I mean, the whole idea of what we've been told is that people need to be able to get to their destinations fast, not held up by the traffic.
I think the distinction, though, is the 20 mile per hour speed limit would not apply to Hills Road because
I'm
it's
not talking about Hills Road, I'm talking about generally, because I understand there's a possibility of the cycleway scheme being introduced on Queen Edith.
It might be interesting.
So that is an issue that will need to be thought about.
Gentleman on the end there.
I was just going to make a point that regarding speed limits and cyclists, that there is absolutely no power in law to enforce a speed limit against a non-motorised vehicle. So the police cannot in any way enforce the limit. That's a central law speed limit. The original speed limit legislation was introduced purely to apply to motorised vehicles. So, just to make sure that's clear.
Unfortunately, the police have left us, so we can't ask them to confirm or deny that they have no powers that they could use. No. Councillor Moore?
Just a quickie, the speed limit in the city was increased for the day that the Tour de France left. Not because of the cycles, but because of the support vehicles. The cycles were all exceeding 30.
Mr. Bell?
Yes, just a personal view. Someone who lives off Yarrow Road, but I think that making Fullbourne Road 20 miles an hour would be bonkers, and probably a lot of other roads too, but I didn't comment on those at the moment. And in the view as a cyclist, I think the idea that a 20 mile an hour speed limits are a great boon to cyclists is a little bit optimistic. I think that when I'm cycling, that a motorist that can't overtake because they're restricted by a speed limit is actually more of a menace than one that can breezily pass. Personally.
Councillor Ashton?
This has been a difficult decision from when it was started 18 months ago, 20 miles an hour. The consensus at the time was that if we were going to do it, it would need to be a citywide application because of the reasons we've said earlier. People then would be going every 20, every 30, every 40, and it just brings confusion in. My own feelings are now that we've actually started implementing this across other parts of the city, we'd actually be a bit, shall I say, oddball now, not to say in the south area you can travel any speed you want to, because it just sends the wrong signals out. And as Councillor Moses pointed out, if you're going to get hit by a vehicle, you've got more chance to survive at 20 miles an hour than you have at 30 miles an hour. And it might be, let's face it, these aren't tablets of stone. In 2 years' time, we could all come back and say, do you know what, this isn't working right on this road or that road. So that could be changed. But I think in principle, the 20 miles an hour is something now we have to stick with across the city.
Councillor Peppers?
Looking at this survey, the main objective was, if I understand it, is we introduced 20-mile speed limits in the residential areas and shopping areas. And do you all agree with that? Is that a good thing or is it not? I think this is your opportunity to say if you're happy for the 20 miles to be introduced in all the residential neighborhoods. Then we have 3 or 4 arteries in Cambridge, and we're trying to decide whether they're going to be 30 miles or 20 miles. It transpires that Cherrington Road, for example, one part of it, which is an artery, is been agreed to 20 miles an hour. It makes economical sense, and it makes more sense for the remainder of the road to become 20 miles an hour, not to confuse the people. So, but roads like Queen Edith, Moby Road, Pearl Road, Long Road, which are arteries to make the traffic move around Cambridge, in my view, should remain at 30 miles an hour. And that's the feedback we're looking from you, if you're in agreement.
Yeah. But everybody's already done. Yeah.
I mean, we have had a consultation and we do have figures before us. Just to say, I think in terms of the decision before the committee tonight, there are 3 things to decide really. One is whether we're happy with the 20 mile per hour limit on the residential roads, which is A. And then 2, which is the introduce a 20 mile per hour limit on all some of the main roads within the South Bays area. Unless people want to do it line by line, it seems to me that there are a group of roads where there is a majority opinion in favour of the 20 mile an hour speed limit, and we could take those as a block. And then there are 4 roads, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, are Brooklands Avenue, Cherry Hinton Road, Queen Edith's Way and Fulbourn Road, where there wasn't a clear mandate from the consultation, although the resident-specific commentary on the following page might qualify that. And I think possibly what we're really deciding is 3 questions. Are we happy with residential? Are we happy with those where there was a majority in favour? And what do we do about 4 roads where there wasn't a majority in favour? Is there anyone else in the audience wanting to comment at this time? Yes, sir.
Just one quick one. In the press, there's been lots of comments about the lack of success of the introduction of the 20 mile per hour scheme to the northern area. So I was wondering what the justification was for taking experience from the northern side to implement it in the south.
Do we have a reaction to that?
Yes. Firstly, if I can just correct you if I may, apologies for that. The speed limit on Brooklands Avenue would be a matter for West Central Area Committee, because Brooklands Avenue falls...
no. It's definitely in Trumpington Ward. The whole length of the pardon,
confusing myself. In North area, we found on average that the traffic speeds reduced by around about 1 mile per hour, which was not unexpected, because if you look at Department of Transport guidance, that suggests that where you introduce speed limits of this type, reduced speed limits of this type, blanket reductions, just on the basis of road markings and traffic signs alone, so in other words, not supported by physical engineering measures, that's the type of level of reduction you're likely to receive. Having said that, on some of the roads where speeds were a little bit higher, such as Ardbury Road, we did actually experience a slightly larger reduction in traffic speeds. I think it was around about 3 miles per hour. But there has been some comment about that level of reduction in the media. But I would just clarify that, as I say, it's not an unexpected level. I don't think we ever anticipated that by this type of project we would be reducing traffic speeds by typically 5 or 10 miles an hour. It's always going to be around about 1 or 2 miles an hour on average, I would imagine.
A quick final comment from Mr. Woodburn, I think, since you know.
I mean, these reductions do seem very small. It is important to realise that they actually, the evidence is rather strong, that they do actually have a significant effect on the outcome of collisions. It reduces the number of collisions and it reduces the number of deaths. The number of people who are killed on the roads, that every year people in Cambridge killed on the roads, the chance of being killed is reduced even by very small reductions in speed. There's quite a lot of evidence on this subject published which shows that such small reductions do make a difference. The other thing that I wanted to say is, when we look at Brooklands Avenue, we should consider the huge new Cambridge assessment building, where there were more than 1,000 people to be employed, to be the biggest business development ever in Cambridge, and those people would be disgorged largely on Brooklands Avenue. And this is all going to happen very soon. So we mustn't think just in terms of the situation as it is now, but the situation in the near future, when there will be very many more vehicles, many more cyclists, many more pedestrians in Brooklands Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right, if I can turn us to the recommendations, I think... Sorry, Councillor Edrick.
So I was just going back on my tweak on our recommendation, which is that it's become apparent that some of the new developments have 30 miles an hour as the speed, which is the default speed of the new development, and that's just funded with the planning condition that was put in place at the time. And those new developments, if they've not been adopted yet by the county council, they don't appear on these maps, and therefore are going to benefit from what I think most people are happy with, which is the purely residential streets that will be faced with 20 miles per hour. So as we are formulating our recommendations to the Executive Councillor, I'd like, and to go back to an earlier point, which is that in order to make the change outside of this scheme, we need a separate traffic regulation order, which takes a long time. So I would like us to add as a prompt to our Executive Councillor that he should consider drawing on the evidence and having better all of this to accelerate the process for putting pressure on the county council to get specifically no roads to an unconventional, but it could be other new developments that have a design speed of 30 miles an hour, get that dealt with, and not wait until those streets have been adopted by the county council. And I would ask the committee to consider that as an additional gloss on the recommendation.
Would the committee be happy with that as an additional item? Thank you. Right, what I'm supposed to do now is, does any member wish to make an argument around the 4 streets which are in the balance, as it were, as to whether they should be included or not? Okay. Right, in that case, I will take the following votes. Vote number 1 is on the first of the recommendations, whether to introduce a 20-mile-an-hour limit on the unclassified roads. Can I see all those in favour? Yes, that's the residential roads. Right. Then we have those roads which are maybe easier, in fact, to do the ones where there is disagreement. So there's Brooklands Avenue, there's Sherrington Road, Queen Edith's Way or Fulbourn Road. Can I see all those in favour of introducing a 20-mile-an-hour limit on Brooklands Avenue? 1. Okay. 2. And those against? Oh, so 3. I think that they have to be revisited in 3 years' time. You voted against, haven't you?
No, sorry, I thought I was voting for.
Right. Cherry Hinton Road, the remaining section thereof, by which we mean the Cherry Hinton part of. All those who would wish to see a 20-mile-per-hour speed limit on that section. So those in favour of the 20-mile-an-hour limit? Yeah?
All the way from Budget to
Yeah. And any against? Oh, sorry, more. Forgotten that aspect of it. Queen Edith's Way. All those in favour of 20-mile-per-hour limit on Queen Edith's Way, can I see, please? 2, and those against? So in fact it's been carried on 2 votes today. And Fulbourn Road. Can I see those who wish to see a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on Fulbourn Road? Apparently not. So and against, just so James, can you recap how we decided on those 4?
Well, the votes I've noted, Chair, there was 1 vote in favour of the 20-mile-an-hour at Brooklyn Avenue, 6 against, so that was lost. 7 were in favour of the Cherry Hinton 20 miles per hour limit, 1 against, so that was carried 20 mile an hour. in your view. 2 councillors voted in favour of 20 miles an hour in between units, none against. No one voted in favour of 20 miles per hour on Fulbourn Road, and just for form, 1 voted against, so there was a clear vote, so there is no 20 miles per hour recommended for Fulbourn Road.
Does anyone wish to request a separate vote on any of the other roads in the list, or do we do a block to say that we support the majority? Then we will do a vote. The remaining roads, are we happy for a 20 mile an hour speed limit? Sorry.
Chair, I was just going to, on that particular point, ask you about Tertiary Drift, where public opinion seems to be well balanced. But the traffic speed data suggests that speed compliance could be a problem if that road becomes 20 miles an hour, because speeds currently are around about 27 miles an hour as a mean. So 3 miles an hour rather than the council's threshold.
Chair, that's not Township. We've brought this up before. That is not Township Drift. Township Drift is the road that goes round the back of the council estate. The road that's being referred to is the road that goes from the mini roundabout
Hinton Road.
Hinton Road, not Township Drift. Yeah.
It's Chillington side of the roundabout, between Church End and the roundabout is the piece we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right location on then.
Right.
Right. Does that mean we need to take a separate separate vote on Tevisham Drift? Or do we in fact need to take a vote on Hinton Drive?
I would, given the data, I would like you to take a decision as to whether you'd like to see that road included or not, please.
Okay, separate vote on Tevisham, but, sorry, it says here majority, 48% agreed. So I was including it in my block vote, because then, I think, okay, it wasn't an absolute majority. We'll take it as a separate vote. All those in favour of Tevisham Drift?
That's important. The Township Drift is not on the main road.
Right.
Want to know the actual location?
So long as officers are clear which road we have in mind. Right. Any against? Right. Can we take a vote on the remaining roads? All those in favour of 20 mile an hour speed limit, please show. And any against? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I've been asked to allow a 5-minute comfort break, so we'll do that now. See people back at 9 o'clock. I guess, yes. I won't take